Midnight. A big box store sleeps behind steel doors and dark windows. Rain drums on the roof. Fluorescent lights hum a cold, steady note. Somewhere down an empty aisle, a recorded voice repeats almost apologetic, "The store is now closed. Please make your way to the exits." Inside the server room, the air tastes like dust and metal. Racks of machines blink their tiny eyes. Two figures press close to a workstation: Jack Harwood, a single dad with tired hands, and May Tran, a cashier with a brave face that won't stop trembling. On the screen, a progress bar crawls forward. 96%, 97, 98, 3% to go, May whispers. Her breath shakes. "If they catch us, your son, they won't," Jack says. His voice is low, steady, a rope thrown across a gap. "Keep breathing." Footsteps scrape the hallway. A key ring clinks. A door handle tests the lock, then tests it again. Motion sensors blink awake and throw pale light under the server room door. Jack freezes. Across the room, a demo toy sits on a wire shelf, some bright plastic robot wired to entice shoppers in daylight. Now, in the dead of night, it chirps with painful cheer. "Hello, friend." May flinches. Jack lunges across cables and cardboard and finds the hidden switch. Silence falls like a dropped curtain. Rain. Light. The hum of machines. No robot voice. 99%. 100. The screen whispers. Transfer complete. May pulls the drive with careful fingers and hides it in her pocket. Jack looks down at the object cradled in his other arm, a toy box. Innocent? Ordinary. But cushioned in its packing is a thin zip bag, and inside that a scrap of truth. An internal receipt stamped with a number that should mean nothing and somehow means everything. $3.27. Small enough to be ignored. Sharp enough to gut a giant. The door handle turns again. A guard mutters into his radio server room lights on. "Who left it like that?" "Check toys first," another voice says closer, "then we're done." The footsteps move away. Light dies in the crack beneath the door. For a breath, nobody moves. Did we just... May can't finish the question. "Not yet," Jack says. "Now." They slip from behind the rack and ghost through the corridor, moving the way people move when they cannot afford sound. Past a stack of unopened pallets, past a camera that blinks red and then mercifully looks elsewhere. Through a service exit that sticks for a heartbeat and then gives. Night swallows them. Rain stitches their coats to their shoulders. Behind them, the store goes on, pretending nothing happened. They do not look back. They disappear into the parking lot with a thumb drive, a toy box, and a truth that no longer fits inside a bag. And for the first time since his wife died, Jack feels something dangerous and electric rise in his chest. Not fear, not yet. Something like purpose. Black. Morning. The storm in your ears softens into a kitchen kind of quiet. A kettle hisses on the stove. A spoon taps the rim of a chipped mug. A city bus sighs to a stop somewhere down the block. The world is ordinary again almost. Jack Harwood speaks, and now it's personal. How did it come to this? A pause. 3 weeks earlier, it started with a toy I couldn't afford. Morning slips into the apartment the way a careful guest crosses a quiet room, soft, apologetic, trying not to wake trouble. The light is thin. The paint by the window has learned patience. A small kitchen stands at attention, one chipped mug, one good bowl, one spoon, that has stirred more courage than coffee. Jack Harwood moves like a man who knows the choreography of survival. He is up before the alarm. He clicks off the alarm anyway and listens to the silence that follows. It feels honest. He likes honest things. He fills the kettle and sets it on the stove. He opens the cupboard and counts the cereal by habit, not because counting helps, but because it keeps his mind from straying to bills. On the refrigerator door, a collage of practical hope, a speech therapy homework sheet with cartoon faces and word balloons, a calendar with 3 boxes circled in blue payday rent, and a birthday. A sticky note that reads in a blocky hand, "You're doing fine," as if the refrigerator needs reassurance. Jack doesn't pour milk before he checks the jar. The jar lives in the cabinet above the sink behind the rice. It is glass and honest as a confession. He unscrews the lid and tips the coins into his palm. Quarters make their small brave clatter. Dimes whisper. Pennies are what stay when nothing else does. He counts once. $18. He counts again because faith is easier when it wears a number. 18. Not enough to fix a life. Maybe enough to fix a day. A door creaks. A small boy steps out pajamas with rocket's hair that refuses to choose a direction. Liam is 7, and sometimes the world is too loud to talk to. He doesn't hurry to the table. He glances first at the shelf where his old toy sits, a scuffed plastic robot with a friendly face. The robot's paint is chipped. Its voice, when it still has one, sounds like a smile that ran out of batteries. "Good morning," Jack says, and keeps his voice gentle and even, because some mornings are a tightrope and some are a bridge. Seat or window. It's a small ritual to give a boy a choice he can handle before the day brings choices he can't. Liam points to the window and climbs into his chair. Jack sets the bowl in front of him, then leans his hip against the counter and watches his son chew slow and careful like a person trying to listen with his tongue. "Friday," Jack says, tapping the calendar with 2 fingers. "Big day, 7 + 1. He smiles a little too brightly. "We'll make it special." Liam doesn't answer, but his eyes lift to the refrigerator where a magazine clipping hangs under a magnet shaped like a tomato. The clipping shows a glossy, impossible robot, newer, brighter, the kind that knows songs and dances and the names of the planets. Liam stares at it the way you stare at a sky you can't reach. Jack follows the look. He clears his throat. "We'll see," he says to the magnet, because saying it to Liam feels like a promise, and he owes his boy only promises he can keep. "We'll see." He makes coffee half strength because the bag is light. He adds hot water until it pretends to be more than it is. He takes a sip and feels just for a second like a person in a commercial who has time to taste things. Then the second ends. He opens the mail. He sets aside the envelopes with windows and breathes through the pinch that starts behind his eyes. On the table, Liam nudges the old robot closer and presses the button that used to wake its cheerful speech. Nothing. He tries again. A soft click answers. The toy has learned how to be silent. Buddy Jack says we can change the batteries tonight. He says it knowing they can't not if the choice is between batteries and gas for the car. He says it anyway because some sentences are rope bridges. You need them even if you build them from words. A clock in the other room argues with the morning. Time to go. Jack wipes the table. He wipes the counter because motion is easier than fear. He packs a lunch for a boy and a lunch for a man, one brown bag with apple slices and a joke on a yellow sticky note that Liam might not read but might feel. One brown bag with peanut butter because peanut butter is history's most reliable invention. At the door, Jack pretends to forget his keys so he can glance again at the photo on the shelf. 2 people younger than they felt. A dress that took a month of saving. A smile that didn't need batteries. He doesn't look long. The past is a kind neighbor, not a landlord. He nods to the version of himself who thought he could hold back weather with willpower. Shoes, coats. The hallway smells like somebody else's cooking, and the elevator sighs like an old dog. On the sidewalk, the city does what cities do, honks and yawns and goes about its business. Liam holds Jack's hand with a grip that says 2 things at once. I am brave and stay. They pass the corner bodega where the owner knows Liam's name but never says it first. They pass a laundromat with a window full of moving circles. They pass the store with a display that has not been updated since the last pay period, toys dancing in a frozen loop, a cardboard rocket, the same robot as the clipping smooth new ready to say 1,000 friendly things. Liam stops. The world narrows to glass and want. He doesn't reach out. He doesn't breathe either. Jack crouches so his eyes are level with his son's. He waits until Liam looks at him. I see it, he says. I know, buddy. A bus wheezes to a stop. Doors fold open like a trick. People shuffle and sigh. Jack could say not today. He could say maybe. He could say nothing at all. He chooses the thing that costs him now and might save him later. After school, he says quiet and sure. We'll come back. We'll see what we can do. Liam studies his father's face, searching for the kind of truth a 7-year-old knows without words. Something loosens in his shoulders. He nods the smallest nod that can still be a nod. On the bus, Jack counts the coins again in his head. 18. Tax will laugh at that. Maybe the price is wrong. Maybe there's a sale. Maybe there's a world where math loves you back. He stares out the window and chooses to believe not in miracles, but in margins, the thin places where a man can wedge his will and pry open a day. He checks his phone. A text from the night shift. Can you cover Friday? He already works Friday. He already works most days. He types and deletes and types again. I can take the later hours. He thinks of the circled square on the calendar. He thinks of cake and a crooked candle and a boy who might laugh out loud. He hits send. At school, the aide at the door greets Liam with the practiced warmth of people who hold many small worlds in their hands. Liam hesitates. Jack kneels and taps the speech therapy sheet tucked in Liam's backpack, a picture of a smile, a picture of a wave, a picture of a thumbs up. He points to each in turn. Liam copies the motions a little stiff, then looks up to check if he has done it right. Perfect, Jack says, as if the word could be a blanket tucked under a chin. I'll be right here at 3. Liam disappears into the hallway. Jack stands for an extra beat and counts to 5 in a language only fathers know. He walks back to the bus stop, shoulders the day, and tells himself the same thing he writes on the refrigerator when the night gets loud. You're doing fine. He doesn't feel fine. He feels like a man balancing a house on a plate. But the plate is still in his hands. And somewhere between here and 3 o'clock there's a toy in a window and a boy who has not given up on wonder. Jack turns toward the store and the coins in his pocket knock together with a sound that could almost be hope. After school, the city has that late afternoon glow that makes even cracked sidewalks look like they belong. Jack and Liam walk the short stretch from the bus stop to the toy store past the laundromat's steady spin and the corner bodega's stacked oranges. Jack has the jar of coins in a paper bag the way a man carries hope when he doesn't want to call it by its name. Inside the store is a field of colors. Aisles are organized like Promises puzzles and paints blocks and bikes a dozen versions of the same plastic dream. Liam's hand tightens just once, then steadies. He doesn't run. He doesn't point. He walks with the grave focus of a child who understands that wanting is different from taking. They stop in front of the display he has memorized from the sidewalk robots lined shoulder to shoulder, each one shiny, each one waiting for a voice command that will never come in this house. Liam looks up not at Jack but at the box with the bright one on the front, the exact model from the magazine clipping on the fridge. Jack's mouth goes dry. The price tag stands there unembarrassed. Jack does the math a father learns to do in his bones. Tag price, sales tax. The numbers don't blink, they don't make room. He turns boxes until he finds a smaller version, same smile, fewer features, a price that wobbles closer to possible. He crouches and holds it where Liam can see both the picture and his father's face. This one sings, Jack says, and it knows the planets. That's pretty good, right? Liam studies the box, then studies Jack. He lifts his shoulders in the smallest shrug that means I can adjust. He is 7 years old and already fluent in compromise. Jack swallows hard and decides not to break in front of the action figures. They carry the box to a register near the end of the row, not the lane with the jaunty balloons or the one with the manager's watchful smile, but the quiet one where the cashier pins her hair back with the kind of clip you buy when you don't plan on treating yourself until next year. Her name tag says May neat block letters that try to look braver than they feel. Find everything okay? She asks. It's the question she has been trained to say, but something in her tone suggests she is asking about more than a box. Jack nods. He sets the toy on the counter and the paper bag of coins beside it. He takes a breath and begins to count. Quarters first because they feel like progress. Then dimes. Then nickels. The register's scanner blinks a red line across cardboard, one clean beep, an official acknowledgement that the world has recorded another purchase. May watches his hands. She sees the calluses that belong to other jobs, the way his fingers hesitate every time a coin leaves his palm. She clicks a few keys. The number on her screen does not change. The math has no sympathy today. Jack keeps counting. He places the last quarter on the counter and waits. There is a pause that feels like a hallway with a closed door at the end of it. May clears her throat. "Birthday?" she asks, glancing at the way Liam's eyes move back and forth between the box and the floor. "Friday," Jack says. He forces a smile that tries not to ask for anything. 7 + 1. She understands maybe more than he wants her to. "Great age," she says softly to the boy and to the man. She leans toward the screen as if proximity could persuade it to be kinder. Over her shoulder, a domed camera stares down with patient, unblinking attention. 2 lanes away, the store manager Cole wears the kind of tie that thinks highly of itself and scans the front end like a lifeguard who never learned to swim. May straightens. "This box," she says, "carefully has a crease on the back. See." Her thumb finds a shallow scuff where the cardboard met the shelf wrong. "We discount for damaged packaging. Store policy." She speaks clearly, but not loudly. She does not look at the camera. Jack's instinct is to protest, to say it's fine, to say they can come back later, to say anything that won't make him a story, but Liam's breath has gone still again, and the calendar on the fridge is waiting, and sometimes dignity is letting someone be kind to you. If that's the policy, he says. It is May answers and taps a code Jack cannot see. The number on the screen shivers and drops. Not low enough to be easy, low enough to be possible. Jack empties the rest of his paper bag. The pile of coins looks like a long day tipped on its side. May counts with him, steady as a metronome. She doesn't rush. She doesn't sigh. When they reach the end, the totals meet like 2 people who didn't expect to recognize each other. "Would you like gift wrap?" May asks. "It's complimentary this week." Jack almost says no. Wrapping paper feels like a luxury item, but he catches himself. A child is turning 8. The world is allowed to look special once in a while. He nods. May reaches under the counter for a roll of paper printed with little rockets and stars. She wraps the box with a competence that suggests she uses muscle memory when sentiment might make her hands shake. The ribbon isn't fancy. It doesn't need to be. As she tapes the last edge, she slides open the small drawer usually reserved for spare pens and receipt paper. From a pocket not meant for customers, she takes a thin zip bag and slips something flat and white inside the size of a receipt, the thickness of a decision. She doesn't look at Jack when she tucks the bag beneath the flap of cardboard and finishes the wrap. Her movements are careful, casual, the way you fold a note you hope will not be discovered by the wrong eyes. She holds the finished gift for a second longer than necessary, and then places it in front of Jack, palms open, as if she is offering not just a box, but a chance. "Happy birthday, Friday," she says, and aims the wish at the boy more than the date. Liam touches the corner of the paper with reverence. His mouth curves. It is not quite a smile, not yet, but it is a step toward one. Cole drifts past the way managers do when they want you to remember they exist. "Everything good here?" he asks, like a statement testing the air. "All set," May says without blinking. "Damaged packaging discount applied. Customer paid in full." Cole's gaze hangs on the paper bag that now lies folded and empty, then on the boy, then on Jack. He tilts his head, an officer considering a traffic stop, and moves on. May lowers her voice. "There's a survey at the bottom of the receipt," she says, handing Jack a slip that looks like any other slip on any other afternoon. "You don't have to fill it out, but if you do, it helps." He takes it grateful in the wordless way that makes your throat tight. "Thank you," he says. "For everything." It's nothing she says, which is the thing. Kind people say when they mean it was something, but you don't owe them for it. She hesitates, then adds, "Enjoy Friday." They leave the store exactly the way they came, in one man, one boy, one box. The sky has begun to think about evening. The bus is on time for once. Jack holds the gift on his lap and feels the weight of it not heavy but present. He can't say why he keeps his hands on the corners guarding the seams as if keeping the paper smooth could keep the day from wrinkling. On the ride home, he checks the receipt out of habit. The discount reads as a code he doesn't recognize. Open BX PKG. It says which could mean anything, which is probably the point. He folds the slip and tucks it in his wallet. Liam leans his head on Jack's arm. The boy is quiet, but his eyes are busy. He is imagining a robot that knows the planets and remembers the names it has been told. He is building a conversation he hopes will exist, even if it has to begin with buttons. Jack studies the taped edge of the wrapping again. Something about it sits like a small secret. He decides without deciding not to think about it until the kitchen table and the safe light of home. That night he will learn there is more to this gift than a toy. He will unearth a slip of corporate paper with a number at the top that insults the idea of fairness unit cost $3.27, and a line in a clear firm hand, "If you need help, come back. I know you don't belong on that blacklist." But for now, there is a bus window, and a boy almost smiling, and a father who has carried a day to its edge and not let it fall. The box rests between them like a promise no one has spoken aloud yet. That night, the apartment wears its quiet like a blanket. Streetlight spills a pale square on the kitchen table. The wrapped box sits in the middle, a small planet with rockets and stars on its paper sky. Jack turns it once then twice as if a better angle might make the week's math kinder. He checks the clock. 2 days until the birthday. He could wait. He should wait. But fathers are licensed to worry, and nothing betrays a child faster than a toy that won't turn on. He calls it a test run in his head to make the decision feel less like surrender. Quality control, he tells Liam with a smile that shows all his teeth and none of his doubts. 2 minutes, then I'll wrap it back exactly how it was. Liam nods solemn as a judge. He perches on a chair, feet swinging in air the way small victories make a boy feel taller. Jack peels the tape with a patience he reserves for delicate things. The paper opens like a held breath let go. Inside, the box is exactly what it promised on the outside, glossy, cardboard-molded plastic, a bright robot with a cheerful face. Jack frees the toy and sets it on the table. He presses the power button. The robot wakes in a friendly little tone, the kind designed by committees to be impossible to hate. A light blinks. The voice arrives, clear and bright. "Hello, friend." It is such a simple sentence. 2 words and a door. Liam's mouth changes. It isn't a grin. It isn't a laugh. It is the beginning of both. Jack has not seen that shape on his son's face in too long. He can feel the day lean toward the light. He reaches for the instruction sheet and notices something wedged beneath the folded cardboard, thin-sealed, easy to miss unless you were looking for it. A clear zip bag. Inside, a white slip stamped with the company's logo and a number that does not belong to a toy on any planet. Unit cost $3.27. Under the number, a line of ink in a hand that does not tremble. If you need help, come back. I know you don't belong on that blacklist. Jack stares at the words until they stop being shapes and start being air. He reads them again, and the room tilts a degree. Blacklist. The word finds the tender place under his ribs, the place where the settlement papers live, where the memory of a supervisor's shrug lives, where the empty inboxes from every job application for the last year live. He slides the slip back into the bag as if someone might be watching. He checks the window, though they are 8 floors up and the only audience is a pigeon doing its evening arithmetic on the rail. He pockets the bag. He wraps the toy again, gently, precisely like a man tending a wound he can't afford to reopen. Liam presses the robot's voice button one more time. "Hello, friend," it says exactly like before. Liam touches the speaker grill, then looks up, eyes bright. He doesn't speak. He doesn't have to. The hope in the glance is a sentence of its own. 2 minutes are up, Jack says soft. Quality control passed. He lifts the rewrapped gift and tucks it into the top cabinet behind the rice. He places his palm against the door as if to bless it, then lets it fall. Later, when Liam is asleep with a paperback space adventure on his chest and the city has dialed down its noise, Jack takes the bag from his pocket and sits with it at the table. The receipt is as plain as the truth. The handwriting is careful and deliberate. He tries to picture the person who wrote it. He tries not to picture what might happen to her if anyone else ever sees it. He lasts an hour. Then he puts on his jacket. The store is a different world after 8 o'clock fluorescent, overwarm music playing a little too cheerfully for a weekday night. Jack takes the long way around the aisles pretending to compare prices on things he isn't buying. At the front, the manager, Cole, lectures a teenager about end cap displays with the energy of a man who believes other people are his to correct. Facing means facing Cole says tapping a line of boxes into perfect obedience. Top edges aligned. We are not a garage sale. He says it loud enough to be overheard and quiet enough to be deniable. He scans the registers with small proprietary eyes. Jack waits for May's lane to open. When she returns from a price check, she spots him before he can lift a hand. Something relief or dread flickers across her face and is gone. Back so soon, she asks, keeping it neutral, a sentence that can be nothing to the wrong ears and everything to the right ones. I think there was an extra receipt in the box, Jack says. He lowers his voice not to be dramatic, but because the truth instinctively protects itself. He puts his elbows on the counter like any man with a customer service question. I thought maybe break room. She says the word, a suggestion, disguised as a fact. Past the staff door left of the soda machine. Give me 2 minutes. She rings through the family and line stickers for the toddler, a practiced smile for the mother, then moves away from her register exactly the way an employee goes, on break, not hurried, not slow, not suspicious. Jack follows the long edge of the counter until it turns into a hallway marked Employees Only. Nobody stops him. People rarely stop men who look like they know where they are going. The break room is a small square of linoleum and resignation. A microwave with a sign that says, Clean Me. A table pitted by years of forks and frustration. On the far wall, a corkboard with schedules, policy updates, and a motivational poster that tries too hard. May slips in and closes the door behind her with the softest possible click. You found it, she says without preamble. Good. Jack takes the bag from his pocket and sets it between them. You wrote this. Her chin lifts not in pride exactly, but in acceptance. I did. What is the blacklist? She studies his face the way a person assesses weather for signs of a turn. You know what it is, she says, even if you don't know the name. A do not hire flag. A quiet code passed around between HR departments when someone costs the company money. People who get hurt on the job and don't keep quiet. People who file a complaint. People who hire lawyers. Jack watches her mouth form the words and tries not to be sick. They can't do that. They shouldn't, she says, but they can. And they do. She taps the receipt with a finger. I used to work upstairs, not here. Numbers, audits. I saw enough to know. I said no to something I was supposed to say yes to. Now I wrap toys. Why me? The question comes out without teeth. Why risk this for me? Because I remembered your name. May says, and now her voice is a little quieter and a little steadier. When you filed your claim last year, your company is a vendor here. Your case crossed our internal reports. You made a dent. And then you disappeared. Not because you gave up, because the door shut behind you. Jack has a thought that is part anger and part grief. All the job applications that died between submit and no response. All the interviews that never made it past hello. All the nights he convinced himself it was bad luck or timing or a world with more applicants than chairs. He feels heat crawl up his neck. He wills it back down. Cole watches everything. May says, almost conversationally as if discussing the weather, but her eyes flick to the ceiling corner where a dark dome hides a lens. I can't talk long. If you push alone, they'll paint you as a crank and me as a disgruntled cashier. They're good at it, better than you think. He nods. He understands how machines are built to defeat single people. Do you have proof, he asks. Not enough, she says, and the words cost her something to say. Not yet. That paper, it's not the proof. It's a breadcrumb. A way to get you back to me without using a phone that might not be yours anymore. The internal price shows you what they say it costs them and what they charge you. It's not the point, but it teaches you the language. The language he repeats because he needs to hold on to something while the floor shifts. Codes, file paths, who to ask for and who to avoid. She takes a breath. If you go back to HR alone, they'll note it and bury it. If you go to a lawyer alone, they'll settle you into silence. If you go to the press alone, you'll be a headline for a day and a footnote for a year. And if I don't go at all, Jack asks. Then it keeps happening, May says simply. To you. To him when he grows up. To people who can't afford to be stubborn. She steps back from the table like someone who has reached the edge of a cliff and chosen for the moment not to jump. I'm not asking you to be a hero, she says. I'm asking you not to be alone. He looks at her and sees more than a name tag now. He sees someone who had a different job, a different life, a different view of the building she now cleans with her kindness. He sees tired in the set of her shoulders and danger in the way her voice moves around certain words. Coffee Jack asks, surprising himself. There's a place around the corner. Cheap. Bad muffins. We could talk. She almost smiles. 15 minutes, she says. And then I'm back to rockets and stars. They take the side door out to the alley and cut across to a sidewalk that smells like rain and fryer oil. They sit on a dented metal bench outside a window where the barista doesn't correct your order because you didn't make one. Paper cups warm their hands. Steam draws small curls into the air. Jack tells her about the jar in the cabinet and the Friday on the calendar, and a boy who pressed a button and heard a voice say, "Hello, friend." May tells him about the move from accounting to cashier, about the meeting where she said no to a spreadsheet that should have said yes about Cole's habit of squeezing hours like a fist squeezes a throat. They don't linger. They don't flirt. But something human moves between them, a wire stretched from one rooftop to another carrying a whisper. I see you. Back at the store, May stands for a second with her hand on the employee door. They count minutes, she says with a small apologetic shrug. If you decide to do something, don't do it without a net. She nods toward his pocket. And keep that where they can't find it. Jack watches her disappear into fluorescent light. He feels the weight of the receipt in his jacket the way a paper can weigh more than a box. He thinks of the robot's happy greeting and the boy who wanted to believe it. He thinks of the word blacklist like a bruise you only notice when someone presses it. On the walk home, Drizzle stitches the evening back together. He takes the long route past the school playground where the swings hang like commas past the laundromat windows full of slow planets. In the apartment, Liam sleeps curled around an old paperback and one corner of a blanket. Jack stands in the doorway and counts to 5 in the language only fathers know. He doesn't sleep quickly. He doesn't decide not tonight. He is a man with a job and a boy and a receipt that feels like a fuse. He lies on his back and watches the ceiling hold. Somewhere above the cabinet behind the rice, a wrapped box waits its turn. And in the room next door, a robot waits to say its line again. Hello, friend. The week does not sprint, it grinds. Jack sends out resumes to places that pretend not to be the same company under different logos. He writes cover letters that make humility sound like a skill. Silence answers most of them. A few write back to say they'll be in touch and then make that sentence a museum piece nice to look at, never used. At night, when Liam is asleep and the apartment has put its worries in the drawer for a few hours, Jack reads the receipt again. That small number at the top $3.27 keeps bothering him like a stone in a shoe you can't find. Blacklist. It's a word that doesn't belong in a country that loves second chances. It sits on his tongue like a lie someone told so many times it learned how to be true. May calls on a Tuesday. There are 2 people you should meet, she says. 15 minutes community center, the side room with the wobbly table. I'll clock out early. The room smells like coffee and floor wax. A bulletin board advertises free tax help and a coat drive. May is already there, arms folded like a person who keeps herself from hugging the whole world. With her a man in a jacket that has lived through more weather than fashion, Nate a legal aid attorney with honest eyes, and a woman with a reporter's notebook and a pen that looks like a small sword. Rachel, local journalist, allergic to spin. Nate nods first. May says you're patient and stubborn. That combination wins cases. I don't want a case, Jack says, and here's how tired his voice sounds. I want a life that doesn't keep falling through a trap door. We build that, Nate says, but we build it on evidence. Rachel flips to a clean page. I've been trying to report on hiring collusion for a year, she says. Hard to prove. Harder to print. The companies buy ad space and the stations call that a coincidence. I call it what it is. May reaches into her tote and pulls out a folder, the kind that creases if you breathe on it wrong. I can't take files out, she says, but I can show you what I used to see when I had the job upstairs. Inside a photocopy of a training slide from years ago, column headers filters a field labeled DNH with a checkbox that shouldn't exist. Another page, a screenshot she took on her phone in a reckless minute, employee IDs, a column of cryptic codes, a note in a margin that reads, Escalate litigation risk. Nate leans in. If this is legit, even as a historical artifact, it gives us a map. Not enough for court yet. Enough to ask better questions under oath. Rachel taps the paper with the back of her pen, and enough to ask the public on air. People hate the word blacklist for a reason. It tells them whose side the story is on. Jack studies the photocopy. The lines look like any spreadsheet on any boring Tuesday. He imagines how many lives can be put in a column and dismissed with a click. If they see you with me, he says to May, they'll cut your hours. Or worse. They already cut my hours, she answers, and pats his fear like a dog that needs calming. I'm down 10 this week. Cole called it a scheduling optimization. As if summoned by his own name, the manager appears in the doorway, not here, not now, but later that night at the store when Jack walks May to the bus stop. Cole's smile is a straight line with no warmth in it. Quick chat, he says, holding the employee schedule like a citation. May, your break today went a minute long. Again, I'll need you to sign this coaching form. And please remember, socializing with customers off the clock can create confusion about boundaries. Understood, May says. She signs. She does not argue. You don't fight every battle. You live to pick the right one. Cole tilts his head toward Jack. Can we help you find anything? I found what I needed, Jack says. That's what we're here for, Cole replies, and lets the words mean whatever they need to mean. The obstacles don't stop there. 2 mornings later, the school has a surprise assembly, balloons, applause, a microphone that squeals. Liam locks up. Sound pours into him and has nowhere to go. He goes small and shakes still. A teacher waves for Jack, who left early from a shift because he has learned how to sense when his son needs him. In the doorway, May appears out of breath. She was dropping off a donation at the community center next door when the text came through. She kneels so her eyes meet Liam's. Hey, Captain, she says softly. This room is too loud. Let's make a quieter room with pictures. From her tote, she pulls a stack of index cards and a black pen. In quick strokes, she draws 4 boxes, a bus, a classroom, a small corner with a chair, a robot with a speech bubble. Under each, she writes a simple word. First, then, next, last. She lays the cards in a row on the floor. First, the bus, she says, tapping. Then the class. Next, a quiet corner. Last, the robot says hello. Her voice turns the cards into a path. She guides Liam's finger from one square to the next, letting him own the journey before he takes it. Liam's shoulders drop a fraction. He points to the robot. May smiles. We can skip. To last, she says. It's okay to win early. Jack watches the air change around his son. He feels something inside him let go and hold on at the same time. He looks at May with a gratitude that is almost too big for the hallway. Where did you learn that? He asks later when Liam is settled in a quieter corner with a librarian who understands the magic of stillness. Volunteer work at the library, she says. Story time for kids who don't love crowds. Social stories, they're called. Pictures give the day a handrail. They walk outside. The sky is the flat gray of a city between forecasts. You're good at this, Jack says. Good at drawing squares, she says, but her laugh lands soft. Good at not giving up. Back at the community center that evening, the wobbly table is busy again. Nate has sketched a plan, gather statements from other workers, file public records requests, secure the data we can without breaking laws the other side will weaponize. Rachel has 2 segments mapped out that the station might allow if she pitches them as human interest pieces and hides the indictment until she has documents to back it. We need one more thing, Nate says. Some active proof, not the training slide, a current list, the tape that binds the boxes together. May nods. There's a local network drive, internal only. If I can find time at a terminal where Cole won't hover, I might pull the path. I can't move files, but I can learn their names. Jack feels that familiar tug-of-war between fear and obligation. He thinks of bills stacked like bricks. He thinks of Liam's hand on the index cards. He thinks of May signing a coaching form she didn't deserve and not flinching. Tell me what you need me to do, he says. Talk to people, Rachel answers. Quietly. The ones who stop to chat at the time clock and look both ways first. Find the others who fell through the trap door and didn't bounce. This only works if it's bigger than you. I can do that, Jack says. He has always been good at listening. He knows the particular music of stories people only tell when the door is half shut. They break before the building closes for the night. In the lobby, a custodian props the door and hums a tune that doesn't mind being off-key. Jack and May step out into air that smells like rain about to happen. Thank you, Jack says. He means for the cards for the folder for seeing him when it would have been easier to look away. You don't owe me anything, May says. We're walking the same direction for a while. That's all. Still, he says. She tucks a strand of hair behind her ear and looks down the block where the bus will appear, then back at him. The moment is not grand. It is steady. It is how people decide to hold each other up without promises they can't keep. Her phone buzzes. A text she doesn't show him. The light in her eyes shifts not by much but enough. I have to go, she says quickly. My shift got changed. Again. She forces a smile that tries to keep the courage in the room. See you tomorrow. Tomorrow, he says. On the way home, Jack stops at the window with the glossy robots. He doesn't go in. He doesn't need to. The gift is waiting in the cabinet, and his son knows how to make a path out of pictures now. He stands there long enough for his reflection to look like a stranger, and then turns back toward the building where the elevator sighs and the hallway smells like somebody else's dinner. Inside, he writes a note and sticks it to the refrigerator above the speech therapy sheet. The note says in his neatest letters, "You're doing fine." He adds a second line and surprises himself by saying it out loud as if speaking it might make the apartment believe him. We are not alone. He doesn't feel brave. He feels like a man learning to be part of a plural. But the word settles into the room and finds itself a chair. Tomorrow there will be more doors that pretend to be walls. Tomorrow there will be a plan with edges. For tonight there is a boy asleep with a paperback tented on his chest, a box behind the rice, and the knowledge that somewhere in this city 2 other people are drawing squares on index cards too, making handrails out of ink. The community center dresses itself up as a town hall, the way a small church tries to be a cathedral. Folding chairs in careful rows, a podium borrowed from the PTA, a coffee urn that apologizes for its own existence. Flyers for free tax help curl on a bulletin board. The carpet remembers better budgets. Nate sets a stack of folders on the wobbly table and straightens them because straightening is a way of promising yourself order. Rachel tests the handheld mic, then sets it down. She prefers her pen. It catches more truth. People drift in the kind of people who learn to carry 2 things at once, hope and caution. A man with a limp that didn't used to be there. A woman whose eyes are tired of interviews that end with, "We'll be in touch." A teenager who thought an apprenticeship was a ladder and found out it was a roof. May stands near the back. She keeps her arms folded like a person holding herself together and holding herself back at the same time. Jack takes a seat where he can see the door and the front, a habit he has never named. He has left Liam with a neighbor who tells stories in a voice that makes bedtime an easy surrender. Nate opens the meeting with a sentence that refuses to be dramatic. "Thank you for coming," he says. "We're here to listen, and we're here to plan." He sketches the ground rules: no blaming each other, no naming names out loud that could get someone fired before we can help them. He talks about affidavits and public records requests and the narrow paths ordinary people walk when the law is polite to power. Rachel gives her version lean and practical. "I can tell this story if I can prove it. I need documents, not just pain. The station will air human interest, one family, one struggle, if we make it safe." The bigger piece waits for paper. Hands rise. Stories come out in the flat tone people use when they've told them too many times I blew the whistle. I slipped on grease nobody cleaned up. I asked for the overtime they promised. I asked why the schedule kept cutting me after I said the word doctor. After we settled, nobody called back. Not here, not there, not anywhere. Jack listens. He hears his life in their rhythms the way a melody repeats in a different key. The door opens not quietly and not loud, but with the confidence of someone who has never been told to wait in the hall. A woman in a good suit walks in flanked by a man carrying a leather folder and a smile that knows what it costs. She moves like a rainstorm that believes itself a favor. "Good evening," she says, and lets the room consider whether the greeting is sincere. "I'm Dana Halverson, Director of Community Relations." The title hangs there soft and press-ready. We're here to listen. Nate doesn't step back. "And who's we?" "My company," she says, and names the chain without apology. "We take concerns seriously. We heard about your meeting." She glides her hand toward the back of the room as if to indicate they have not been snooping, merely attending. "We want to help." Rachel's pen stills. On the record, she asks. "Of course," Dana says, and then makes her first precise cut. "Within reason." She looks at Jack as if she has been briefed on the room and the plot and the audience's favorite character. "Mr. Harwood," she says, almost tender, "we're familiar with your case." Jack doesn't answer. The room shifts. Eyes move between them like a current changing direction. Dana opens the leather folder. She takes out a long white envelope with the quiet gravity of an offering. "We deeply regret any misunderstanding regarding your reemployment prospects. We would like to extend a goodwill payment to assist your family during this transitional season." She says the amount, without flinching, 5 figures large enough to sit heavily in the imagination, small enough to be a rounding error on a quarterly call. No admission of wrongdoing. A standard confidentiality provision. "You deserve stability, Mr. Harwood. We can provide that right now. The check is not a novelty prop. It is real, clean, indifferent. It is rent on time for a year. It is speech therapy without the jar. It is a coat that fits and a car that starts on the first try. It is oxygen being offered to a man underwater." Jack feels the room tilt toward the envelope the way rooms tilt toward money even when people pretend they don't. He pictures Liam's face when the robot said, "Hello, friend." He contemplates what it would cost to buy a year of that face relaxing. Nate doesn't move, and the others he asks. The ones in this room. The ones not brave enough to come. "We have a fund," Dana says smoothly. "We can review individual circumstances, but we cannot accept any implication of a systemic error. There is no list, Mr. Carver." She pronounces Nate's name as if she chose not to learn it properly. Rachel lifts her chin. Then why the confidentiality to protect all parties from reputational harm? Dana answers as if the words are a blanket she is laying over a sleeping child. "We would prefer to work together constructively. Headlines create heat, not light. May hasn't moved either. She is looking at the check and then at Jack and then at the exit as if she is calculating not whether to run, but how quickly consequences might arrive if anyone chooses wrong. Cole's shadow is not here in person, but it lingers in the way May holds her shoulders half-braced. Dana turns to her last as if she has been saving this part. "Ms. Tran," she says, and the softness leaves her voice. "We appreciate your enthusiasm for customer service. However, we are aware of timekeeping irregularities and procedural deviations at your location. You should expect a formal review of your position. Suspension is on the table while we clarify the facts. The room hears the subtext. Stay in your lane. Your lane is where we put you." May doesn't look at the floor. She doesn't look at the ceiling. She looks at Dana and then at Jack, and does nothing with her face except refuse to break. Jack's breath shortens, then steadies. He thinks of how many times he has told himself to be pragmatic, to take what he can get, to leave the big fights to people who aren't holding a child's hand across a busy street. He thinks of the note in the zip bag. "If you need help, come back," and the ink that didn't tremble. He thinks of Liam's shoulders loosening when pictures made a path. He thinks of May signing a coaching form because strategy sometimes looks like surrender from a distance. Dana steps closer and holds out the envelope, palm up. "You have responsibilities," she says, and the word is a caress and a cage. "Let us help you meet them. Let's be adults." Jack takes the envelope. Paper is lighter than it looks when it changes your life. He slides a finger under the flap and widens it. A rectangular truth peeks out ink number signatures that mean what they say. He could put it in his pocket and walk out and call the neighbor and ask her to keep Liam for an hour longer so he could just sit on the steps and let the relief shake through him. He could do that. A good father in a hard story might do exactly that, and nobody in this room would blame him. He looks at May. She is not pleading. She is not performing. She is standing like a person who made a decision about who she is a long time ago and has not found a reason to change it. Jack looks down at the check one more time. Then he tears it in half. The sound is small. Paper is polite when it dies. He tears it again and again and again until the pieces look like confetti nobody wants to sweep. He places the neat pile back in the envelope and sets it on the wobbly table. "No," he says. For a heartbeat, nothing moves. Then the room exhales a breath it didn't know it was holding. Someone coughs the sound of shock, remembering it has a body. Dana's smile hardens into something you could cut a rope with. "That was unwise," she says softly. "For you, for your friends." "For my son," Jack says, and the sentence is so simple it can't be argued with. He deserves a world where a person isn't penalized for telling the truth. Nate's mouth edges toward a smile and stops because victory is a word you don't use this early. "Ms. Halverson," he says, "will be submitting discovery requests this week. If there is no list, then there will be no documents to produce. If there are documents, we'll accept them promptly." Rachel already has the moment captured, not the paper tearing, but the expressions that followed. "Off the record is over," she says to nobody in particular. "People will want to hear this." Dana slips the ruined envelope back into the leather folder with fingers that would prefer to be clean. "I'll notify our counsel," she says, and makes the verb sound like a weather event. "Ms. Tran, your suspension is effective immediately pending review. You will be contacted. There it is. The cost comes due." May nods once a motion that says, "I counted this price before I named it." She thanks the room for listening as if she were a host closing a potluck. Dana leaves. The assistants follow tall and silent. The door doesn't slam. It doesn't need to. The echo stays anyway. The meeting dissolves into small groups, questions plans, anger that tries to be useful. Nate starts a list of names. Rachel outlines the first segment, faces facts, the line between them. Jack gathers the pieces of the torn check before he realizes why he is doing it. Maybe to keep them from being trash. Maybe to remind himself later that decisions have a texture. He finds May by the coffee urn. "I'm sorry," he says, and means for the part where her hours will vanish and bills will not. "If I had taken it, you." "If you had taken it," she says, gentle but firm, "they would have picked us off one by one until the word 'we' meant nothing." She looks tired, not theatrically, but in the way a person looks when the day has decided to be too long. We'll be okay. Okay isn't pretty. It's still okay. You shouldn't have to lose your job because I didn't want to lose my spine, he says. I lost that job already, she answers with a small shrug. Today, they just said it out loud. He watches the room empty into the corridor where coats become weather and weather becomes bus routes. We need more than stories, he says, thinking about what Nate asked for documents that breathe. We need the kind of proof that doesn't flinch under a spotlight. May nods. I might have a path, she says. Local network drive. The list isn't in the cloud. It's old school because old habits hide better in old places. I can't move files, but I can learn what the files are called and where they sit. How Jack asks. I have credentials, she says with a shadow of her former life. Some doors never got their locks changed. She meets his eye. If we go after this, we need to be careful. If we trip an alarm, they'll erase everything before morning. He thinks of the cabinet above the rice. He thinks of the zip bag. He thinks of how a number can be small and still be a key. Then we don't trip anything he says. We plan like boring people. Invisible people. Boring, she repeats, and for the first time tonight her mouth shapes something almost like amusement. I can do boring. They walk out together. On the steps, they pause the way you do when the sidewalk is a decision. She will turn left toward a bus that will feel longer than it is. He will turn right toward a building that still smells like somebody else's dinner. Thank you, he says, for what she asks. For the piece of paper, he says. For the index cards. For staying. She nods once. Friday, she says, reminding him of the square on the calendar. Don't let them take that too. He promises, and this time, the promise feels earned. When he reaches the apartment, he stands in front of the cabinet and touches the door the way he did the first night, not for luck, but for alignment. In the bedroom, Liam sleeps with one hand on the old robot as if they made a truce. Jack sits at the table and writes a list. It is not poetic. It is not brave. It says Nate affidavits. Rachel, first piece. Maypath, to drive. Jack, people to talk to. It is a way to turn a choice into a plan. Outside the city holds its breath between forecasts. Inside, a father counts to 5 in a language you don't learn until you need it. And far from this kitchen in an office where lights don't turn off, someone writes an email that will make tomorrow harder. The midpoint of a story is where you decide what kind of ending you're willing to fight for. Jack doesn't sleep much. He has decided. The plan wasn't glamorous. It was the kind you make when you know nobody is coming to save you, quiet plain, held together by tape and nerve. May found the path first. On her lunch, she borrowed a returns terminal, the kind with old permissions nobody remembered to revoke. She didn't take anything. She looked. She followed breadcrumbs only insiders notice a share name that didn't match the naming convention. A folder, one letter off from policy, a training slide she once approved that had lived long enough to become cover. She wrote nothing down. She kept it in her head the way people keep songs when they're not allowed to carry sheet music out the door. Local drive, she told Jack that evening at the wobbly table. Not the cloud. They hide the list the old-fashioned way. The file names are boring on purpose. But there's a pattern. HR compliance, something called Risk Ledger, and a nested folder labeled Do Not Hire. If we copy it, they tell Jack asked. They'll know eventually, she said. Tomorrow or next week. But there's a maintenance window after closing when logging goes quiet. If we're in and out before the nightly sweep, we might slip under the noise floor. He nodded. He'd worked enough graveyard shifts to respect the way clocks have blind spots. Tonight, she said. Her suspension was already in place. She had nothing left to protect but time. They met an hour after the store closed, not at the front entrance where good news poses for cameras, but at the service door and back where deliveries and apologies arrive. Jack wore the kind of jacket everyone forgets. May wore the kind of calm you borrow when your own has run out. Inside the building felt different without customers to perform for. The aisles looked tired in the wrong light. Marketing kept smiling anyway. They moved like ghosts because they wanted to be the kind the living never notice. May keyed in an old coat at a side hallway, an artifact from the job she used to do when she had an office instead of a lane number. The door clicked. Up close, the server room was smaller than Jack imagined, less science fiction and more closet with ambition. Racks of machines made the air taste metallic. May sat at the console, not touching anything until she knew where everything lived. Then she typed. There was no flourish. She had learned this language when it still felt like a career. Here she said, not pointing, just breathing the word toward the screen. HR. Compliance. Risk. She opened folders like a person opening drawers in a house she once owned. She found the path she had been keeping in her head so long it had begun to ache. A prompt asked for credentials. She gave them the way you give your name to a guard who once waved you through. The directory bloomed. Copy, Jack said, because the word calmed him. Copy everything. Not everything she said, only what we can carry without tripping a threshold. Too much traffic, they wake up. She selected files with names boring enough to be important. A progress bar appeared. 91%, 92. Footsteps drifted down the hall, rubber soles, the tired rhythm of men who've walked these floors so often their bodies don't ask permission anymore. Guards, Jack said. May didn't look up. They do this pass every hour. 2 doors down, then back. If we're lucky, they'll complain about the vending machine again. It steals dollars like it has a quota. 96. A motion sensor woke in the hallway, painting a pale slash under the door. A hand tested the handle. It held. The key ring jingled, then fell quiet. The men moved on their commentary about the vending machine, bitter enough to be real. 98. A demo robot on a shelf in the corner decided to perform. It chirped with a cheer no one had programmed for stealth. Hello, friend. Jack crossed the room in 2 strides and found the tiny toggle under its base. He clicked it off like a man putting a finger to the lips of a child about to give them both away. 99. 100. Transfer complete. The machine said it without drama, as if this were nothing more than a form to be filed. May slid the drive free and tucked it inside her sleeve. Jack lifted the item they had decided would be their prop if anyone asked why they were here, a box from a return pallet forgettable under fluorescent light. Together, they eased the door, stepped into the hallway, and breathed like people who know the difference between safe and not yet caught. They took the long route out past the break room where a motivational poster promised that teams make dreams, and someone had drawn a mustache on the word dreams. Past the employee corkboard where the schedule treated the word courtesy like a rumor. Past a stack of empty boxes that would be full of merchandise by morning and empty of meaning by night. Outside, rain stitched the pavement to their shoes. No siren followed. No voice called out. The night pretended they were ordinary again. In a diner 2 blocks away, at a table polished by 1,000 elbows, May pushed the drive across the Formica. Your house, she said. Your computer. If they search mine, I want them to find nothing but recipes and old resumes. Jack closed his hand around the drive. It didn't weigh much. Some things don't until you know what they carry. He looked at May. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. This is the part of the movie where the credits roll, he said, trying on a joke that didn't fit. This is the part where we check if the file opens, she said. They didn't wait. They rode the bus like 2 strangers who happened to be heading the same direction and stayed strangers until the doors hissed open on Jack's block. In the apartment, the kitchen wore its late-night quiet. Liam slept in a room down the hall where a paperback had slid to the floor and a lamp still glowed like a small moon. Jack slid the drive into the old laptop that hissed when it tried to be new. The directory presented itself: HR compliance risk, ledger do not hire. File names marched in neat rows, a spreadsheet that sounded like Innocence status master. Another with a name that wanted to be helpful: rehire, guidelines final. A third that did not pretend: escalation flag index. He double-clicked the first. The machine thought. It did not open. A prompt appeared: enter decryption key. He tried the obvious May's old credentials, the store's location code, the vendor ID from his settlement papers, the kind of default string that hides in manuals. The prompt blinked back at him indifferent. May stood by the sink with her arms folded, not because she wanted to be closed, but because sometimes you need your own hands to keep you from unraveling. "There's a key," she said. "There's always a key." "We don't have it," he said. She took the receipt from her pocket, the little truth in a zip bag that had started this sprint. "This number," she said, quietly tapping the top. 327. It has to mean something more than insult. Maybe assault, maybe part of a password, maybe nothing. He tried combinations 327, appended, prefixed double-halved. The laptop stayed polite. It also stayed closed. "Okay," she said, and put the receipt away as if tucking a child back to bed. "Then we don't break the door tonight. We come back with the right key tomorrow." He nodded, and the nod did the work of swallowing disappointment. "Tomorrow." "Don't keep the drive in a drawer," she said. "If they come here, you want it somewhere they won't look because they're too tired to be clever." He looked up at the cabinet above the rice. He almost smiled. "I already have a place." May touched the back of a chair. "I should go. I'll walk you to the bus." On the stairs, the elevator sighed, doing its best. In the street, the city was a map of wet light. They didn't talk much. They didn't have to. When the bus came, she stepped up, turned back once, and said, "We're close." It wasn't bravado. It was simple math. Jack watched the bus pull away and felt gratitude and fear take turns in his chest. He went upstairs, hid the drive where the cereal boxes looked like life, and lay awake staring at a ceiling that had kept its side of the bargain for years. He remembered the server room, the robot's bright voice, the progress bar cresting. He remembered the way May's hands had not shaken when the screen said complete. He remembered that they had stolen proof, and for tonight the proof had stolen nothing back but sleep. He slept eventually. Morning would make its demands. And then, on a day when he needed a win, the day would decide to be cruel. Cruelty never arrives alone. It brings friends. At 10 a.m., the store sent a letter by email and by post because somebody in legal believed in belts and suspenders. Effective immediately, it read, "May Tran is terminated for cause." It listed the causes like a grocery receipt, time-keeping discrepancies, procedural deviations, insubordination. It was a story told by a system to itself about why it was right. At noon, Jack's supervisor called from the night shift and used a voice he reserved for funerals and new policies. "Hours cut," he said. "Budget. Nothing to do with, I fought." He hadn't. Jack didn't ask him to lie more than he already had. At 2, the landlord texted a reminder that read like a threat. Rent due by Friday, close of business. There was no hidden clause for good intentions. There never is. At 3, the school called. Liam had a rough day. A substitute had tried a new routine without warning. A fire alarm test had not stayed on the calendar where it belonged. Jack arrived to find his son knotted into a ball of quiet that hurt to watch. He knelt. He folded himself small enough to be next to the hurt without stepping on it. It took time. It took all the gentleness he had and a few drops more. He ran out of words and used presence instead. At 5 at home, Liam pressed the button on the old robot and it didn't answer. He tried again harder as if a firmer press could summon mercy. Plastic cracked. The robot's face split along a seam that had been waiting for this moment. Liam didn't cry loudly. He made the sound of air being punched out of a small body. Then he went silent in a way that taught silence a lesson. Jack picked up the 2 halves of the toy and told himself that glue is a verb. "We can fix it," he said, and knew the sentence was doing work far beyond plastic. "We can fix it, buddy." Liam looked at him. He didn't nod. He didn't shake his head. He held his father's eyes for 3 full heartbeats and then looked down. Sometimes that is how children say, "Please fix the world, not just the toy." When the apartment settled into evening, Jack took the drive from its hiding place and tried the files again. The laptop presented the same unhelpful prompt. He entered the numbers until the numbers meant nothing. He tried the kind of words people use when they run out of better ones. Password access unlock. The machine stayed closed and kind like a door with a butler. He called May. She answered on the second ring as if she had been standing near the phone because standing gave the day something to lean on. "I'm fired," she said before he could ask. "They timed it so I couldn't appeal until after the weekend. It's efficient. You almost have to admire the symmetry." "I'm sorry," he said, and meant for the part where she deserved none of this. "The files won't open. I've tried everything, including things I'm embarrassed to admit I tried." "I know why," she said. He could hear a street in her background bus's crosswalk beeps a city that goes on indifferent. "The key. They changed it last quarter. I read the memo and didn't read it because I wasn't in that room anymore. It mentions a cost anchor in the format, a hint only insiders would recognize." "327, he said, and it felt like finding an old note in his own handwriting. Unit cost. Maybe she said, but not as numbers, as positions, as she stopped. "I'm not sure, not yet. I need to think in their language again." He heard the fatigue in her voice and the iron under it. "Rest," he said. Tomorrow I start looking for a job I can lose," she said, and the attempt at humor almost made it. "We'll figure the key. We always do. He should have said we have time. He should have said, take my hours. He should have said the sentences that go on cards people keep in drawers for days when the air is thin. Instead, fear spoke for him. It was dressed up as caution, as care, as responsible fatherhood. Maybe he said, maybe we should stop. Let the lawyer file what he can with what we have. The rest. He ran a hand over his face as if he could smooth it into a better decision. "You've lost your job. Liam's school. The rent. I can't keep dragging you into." "You're not dragging me," she said. No anger, just a steadying hand on a thought that was stumbling. "I walked. I know," he said quickly. "I know. It's just—" He searched for a word that meant protect without meaning abandon. "It's a lot." On her end, a bus exhaled, and then the line did too. "It is," she said. "Take tonight. If you still want to stop in the morning, say it then. Don't say it because today was mean." He said nothing for a moment. Sometimes silence is consent. Sometimes it is exhaustion. Sometimes it is a man watching his courage try to climb a wet wall. "Okay," he said at last. "Tomorrow." "Tomorrow," she echoed, and the word did not promise anything beyond arriving. They hung up with the gentleness of people who don't want to make more noise than the day already has. Jack stood in the kitchen and found that the apartment had shrunk by a foot on every side. He took the note off the refrigerator, the one that said, "You're doing fine," and moved it from the top corner to the middle because gravity needed help. He started to make dinner and forgot what he was making twice. He ate standing up because the chair looked like a commitment. When Liam was in bed, Jack sat with the broken robot and a tube of glue. He aligned the seams slowly as if aligning them might teach him how to align everything else. He pressed the halves together and held them with both hands for longer than the instructions required. When the plastic kept refusing to be whole, he held it longer. When his fingers began to shake, he told them to stop. They didn't. He wasn't crying. He was a man in a kitchen at 9 p.m., with glue on his hands and a list on his table. Nate affidavits. Rachel segment. May fired. Jack hours cut. Rent Friday. He whispered something he hadn't said since the hospital, since a nurse had taken his coffee cup away and put a hand on his shoulder like a temporary anchor. "I can't do this," he said, and then he said it again, softer, not because he meant it, but because he didn't know what else to say between now and the moment he would get up and keep doing it anyway. In the other room, Liam turned in his sleep and mumbled a word that wasn't a word yet. It was a shape of sound that sounded like trying. Jack set the robot down and went to the doorway and stood there until the night made room around him. All is lost isn't when the bad thing happens. It's when the story convinces you the good thing was a hallucination. He stayed there until that lie ran out of breath. On the table, the thumb drive waited like a small moon. On the fridge, the note waited too. In the cabinet behind the rice, a wrapped box kept its place. Tomorrow wasn't a promise, it was a direction. He pointed his tired body toward it and decided to arrive. Morning arrives with edges. Jack moves through it on instinct, pack a lunch sign, a form, count the coins by touch, and tells himself not to make any permanent decisions while the day is still rubbing its eyes. On a city bus 2 neighborhoods away, May stares at the little zip bag in her palm. The receipt sits inside like a trapped moth. She has read it until the ink feels thin. The logo, the unit cost $3.27, the long barcode at the bottom. Her mind reaches for old habits the way a swimmer's body remembers water after years on land. Last quarter, a memo. Not hers to act on, but she saw it. A security note about cost anchors and hybrid salts added to reduce leaks. It was corporate poetry, for we made the key look like paperwork. The bus takes a turn. Her coffee sloshes. She looks again, not at the number itself, but at how it sits on the page above the barcode left of a tiny code printed for internal eyes, only OpenBX PKG. Open box package. A discount reason. A door that names itself. 3, 2, 7. Not dollars. Positions. May takes out a pen. She writes the store location code she knows by heart and numbers its letters. She pulls the 3rd, the 2nd, the 7th. She stitches them to OpenBX PKG, then adds the last 4 of the barcode the way the memo described. It looks wrong until it looks familiar, the way a word looks strange when you've stared too long and then suddenly means itself again. She calls Jack. "I have the key," she says. It is not triumphant. It is relief with a spine. He doesn't ask how. He says, "Come over," and the words make a path for his day to follow. At the kitchen table, the old laptop hums like it's trying. Jack types what May says. The prompt waits. He hits return. The first file opens with the indifference of a door that was always supposed to swing for the right knock. Rows and columns bloom like a cruel garden, names, IDs, dates, flags. A column labeled DNH holds a simple truth in checkboxes. The notes field makes the story uglier. Litigation exposure advise vendors. Non-compliant reduce hours. Medical accommodation request watch. They move through more directories. An email thread where executives discuss reputational risk as if it were a weather forecast. A legal slide deck that insists in one bullet point there is no list, and in another explains how to ensure consistent vendor coordination. A calendar reminder for a maintenance window labeled Archive Rotation set for midnight recurring. Nate arrives as if he had been waiting outside the door. Rachel arrives with a notebook and the look reporters get when the story moves from rumor to paper. They don't congratulate. They inventory. Nate photographs process not just documents but their paths, names, timestamps, chain of custody. "We don't leak first," he says. "We file first." He drafts the complaint to the state labor commissioner and the attorney general with the quiet speed of a man who has done this too often for people who never get thanked. Rachel reads, and her pen writes the way a small sword moves. "We'll do 2 pieces," she says. "Tonight, the human story that doesn't compromise evidence. Tomorrow, if the station has a spine, the documents. If they don't, I know a paper that does." May stands by the window and lets the city be a steadying noise. Her termination email glows on her phone like a bad joke. Jack watches her and sees the fatigue around her mouth and the iron under it. "Thank you," he says. For what she asks. For staying long enough to remember the language, he says. For teaching me to speak it. The plan is simple because it has to be. Nate will file before lunch. Rachel will run a preview tease at 6. Jack will call the list of names he gathered in break rooms and on stoops, the ones who whispered and looked both ways first, and ask them to stand in a room together with lights on. They work. The apartment shrinks and expands with people and paper and purpose. When it's time, Nate leaves with a folder and a promise to return with a file stamp. Rachel leaves with copies and a question for her editor framed as an opportunity. May leaves last. At the door, she looks back at Jack and gives him a nod that says, "Keep going." He nods back with you. Midday becomes afternoon. The complaint finds its stamp. The segment makes the 6 o'clock rundown not as a favor, but as a dare. The town hall is scheduled for 8 at the community center because the carpet there already forgives. Jack stands in front of the cabinet above the rice and touches the door just once. The box waits where it has always waited. 2 more squares, he tells the calendar out loud because saying it makes the day step forward. He puts on his jacket. He leaves the apartment and chooses a direction called Finish. The community center fills like a lung. Folding chairs, a podium that thinks well of itself, a camera from the local station with a lens that looks larger than the budget. The air has the charge of a thunderstorm deciding whether to commit. People come. The man with the limp. The woman with the tired eyes. A cashier from across town who was disciplined for tone. A warehouse worker whose file notes called him problematic the week after he asked for a ramp. Their stories sit down next to them and take up space. Dana Halverson arrives at the last minute immaculate and flanked. Cole sticks to the doorway like gum that never quite leaves your shoe. Lawyers hover somewhere between the wall and the air. Rachel opens with the family piece, a father, a son, a toy on a shelf. She doesn't say blacklist. She doesn't have to. The word hangs above the room like a sign everyone already read on their way in. Then Nate steps up. He is not theatrical. He is a man reading a map. Today, he says we filed a complaint with the state labor commissioner and forwarded evidence to the attorney general's office. He holds up the stamped cover sheet not as a talisman, but as a receipt. We allege collusion to restrict employment opportunities for workers who exercised lawful rights. Here is why. He clicks to the first slide, not the juicy one, the boring one. File paths, names, modified dates. He explains how ordinary cruelty hides in ordinary folders. He shows the status master spreadsheet and reads headers out loud because truth should be spoken plainly. He shows 2 emails, one that publicly disavows lists and one that privately coordinates them. He shows the maintenance calendar entry labeled Archive Rotation for midnight. Dana requests the mic. She uses the smile a storm uses when it wants to be mistaken for shade. These are out of context, she says. We do not maintain illegal lists. Our compliance practices meet all industry standards. We will review these materials and cooperate fully with any lawful inquiry. She says cooperate like a velvet rope across a doorway. Rachel doesn't take the mic back. She asks a question instead. If there is no list, why use do not hire as a directory name? Dana's smile does not move. We will not litigate in a community center. Why not someone calls from the 3rd row? That's where the consequences live. Nate advances to the slide with the policy deck, the one that says ensure consistent vendor coordination. He reads 2 bullet points, then places the next page on an overhead projector because sometimes old technology gives the moment the weight it deserves. The next page is a red line with a clause about litigation exposure and rehire guidelines. The words do not blush. Neither does the man who wrote them, because he is not here. Cole tries to exit quietly the way a bad smell tries to convince you it was always outside. He doesn't make it. A worker from his store, someone whose schedule has been a knife, lately speaks up with a voice she didn't think she owned. Tell them about the time you told me we don't need complainers, she says. Tell them how my hours vanished when I asked for a chair. Cole blusters something about operational needs. The room is done with euphemisms. Dana switches tactics. We are equally concerned about potential data theft, she says. Breaking into secure systems is a crime. Nate nods almost pleasantly. Which is why we didn't break in, he says. An employee with credentials accessed an internal file system during a maintenance window, copied limited data to preserve evidence, and delivered it to counsel. That is called whistleblowing. The law makes room for it when companies don't. A new voice speaks from the side, a representative from the state labor office, gray suit, clipboard, the kind of person nobody notices until the day you need them to be real. We have received the complaint, she says. We will be issuing preservation notices tonight. Any deletion or alteration of the reference directories will be treated as spoliation. Midnight loses its teeth in an instant. Rachel closes with what local news does best when it remembers what it's for, faces, names, a number, at the end that isn't viewers, but people 137 flagged profiles in the files. They saw a fraction of the whole. She doesn't say heroes. She doesn't need to. She says neighbors, and that lands. Dana confers with a lawyer. They make the only move that keeps them from losing more ground on camera. Pending review, she says carefully, we will suspend the use of any internal status designations related to rehire eligibility and initiate an external audit. We will also offer interim reinstatement to any employee terminated in the last 30 days while we verify facts. It is not an apology. It is not enough. It is a door opening because someone put a foot in the frame. The room doesn't cheer. It breathes. People do the math of what a suspension could mean to a rent due on Friday. A woman in the second row wipes her eyes like someone caught by surprise by the possibility of later. Jack says nothing to the camera. He has done his piece. He stands near the back with May and watches the ground shift under the building in a way that suggests it might settle somewhere better. On the way out, Dana pauses in front of them. You've made this painful, she says without heat. There were easier ways. There were easier ways. Jack agrees for you. May meets Dana's gaze and does not blink. Painful isn't the worst thing she says. Permanent is. They step into the night. The air is a degree softer. It is not victory. It is movement. Sometimes movement is what you get. Sometimes it is enough to get you to the next place where your feet can stand. The morning after looks ordinary from a distance. Sun on a stoop. A bus keeping its own schedule. A neighbor watering a plant like it owes her money. In Jack's kitchen, the refrigerator wears a new paper beside the old sticky note. The new one is a photocopy of a letter on heavy stock notice of interim reinstatement, May Tran. Effective immediately pending audit. Beside it, another letter, a formal notice from the company suspending any rehire coordination protocols while an independent review proceeds. It reads like a lawyer wrote it with one hand and held their nose with the other. Nate says there will be more to fight. Rachel says the station is running the follow-up at 6. The labor office says preservation notices went out at midnight and will be enforced. Jack says thank you to a room that holds the thanks without dropping any. He takes the box from the cabinet above the rice. He spreads a square of wrapping paper on the table because rituals are how you tell time to behave. He calls Liam. The boy sits with that grave attention he gives to the moments that matter. Jack sets the gift in front of him, and Liam looks not at the paper, but at his father as if to ask, is it safe to want something? It's safe, Jack says. Liam peels the tape carefully the way he learned from his father. The box opens. The robot waits where it has waited. Jack clicks the switch. Hello, friend, the robot says in that cheerful way. It is a ridiculous sentence. It breaks him anyway. Liam laughs a small surprised laugh that sounds like a door unsticking. He presses the silver button. The robot lists the planets not in order, and nobody corrects it. Liam tries the voice setting. The toy responds too bright, too optimistic, and somehow exactly right. Do you want to try something? Jack asks, his voice low steady. He touches the row of picture cards May left first. Then, next, last. He points to the robot. He points to himself. He waits. Liam nods. He shapes his mouth around the thing he has been keeping for a day like this. It doesn't come at once. It comes the way spring comes to a city, slow, stubborn, arriving in small green pieces. Thank you, Dad, he says. Jack swallows. The second sentence is easier than the first. Thank you, May. From the doorway, May answers before she means to. You're welcome, Captain. She is not in her apron. She is in the kind of sweater you wear when a day doesn't require armor. She holds a folder, the reinstatement letter, and a bag of groceries like a person who never arrives empty-handed. Thought I'd risk bringing contraband, she says, lifting a carton of eggs as if they were treasure. We have something to celebrate, and I can make pancakes that pretend to be cake. Jack laughs. It's not careful. It's not strategic. It's relief, dressed like joy. He steps aside to let her in, and the apartment makes room as if it had been waiting for a little more life. They eat at the table that has seen worse. Nate stops by with coffee and the list of next steps written in a small, relentless hand. Rachel texts a photo from the station your segment is the lead. The neighbor knocks and says her TV made her cry. Liam feeds the robot a command it doesn't understand and doesn't mind. When the plates are a mess of syrup and Happy Jack asks the question that has been patient all morning. What happens now? Now we keep going, May says. Audit, settlements, policy changes, a watchdog group that lives outside their payroll. We build something that outlasts Buzz. Nate adds, there's a fund we can set up temporary help for anyone who fell through the trap door while we fix the floor. Rachel says, and we keep telling it until it stops needing to be told. She puts her pen away. Today is a good headline. Don't let it be the end of the story. Jack nods. He looks at Liam tracing a finger across the picture cards like a pianist learning a new song. He looks at May, who moved from a lane number to the front line and didn't change her name. He looks at the little zip bag on the counter, the receipt that was a key that was a fuse. There will be more days with edges. There will be paperwork that tries to outlast justice. There will be people who are tired of hearing about it and people who can't stop living it. But today is a day you can hold without it cutting you. That afternoon, they walk to the park. The sun is the right kind of brave. Kids run in chaotic orbits. A breeze moves the leaves the way applause moves a room that chose to be kind. Jack and May sit on a bench worn smooth by other conversations. Liam kneels in the grass and makes the robot march with dignity across a world that does not always deserve it. Thank you. Jack says not to the sky, not to the plot, but to the person beside him who made a choice when looking away would have been easier. May bumps his shoulder with hers. You're welcome, she says. We're walking the same direction for a while. He doesn't make it larger than it is. He lets it be what it is, company. The robot chirps, hello, friend. The line has become ridiculous and perfect. Liam looks up, eyes bright, and waves at nothing in particular and everything at once. Some stories end with thunder. This one ends with sunlight and a small voice that finally found its way out. Justice did not arrive in a robe. It arrived in a folder, a file path, a town hall, and a kitchen where someone wrote, "You're doing fine," and then decided to believe it. Love did not announce itself with music. It sat on a park bench and made plans for pancakes. If this story found you on a hard day, let it leave something behind a handrail, a word, a reason to try again. Share it with someone who needs to hear that good people still choose each other. We are not alone. If this story found you on a hard day, carry this with you. Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's a note in a box. Justice doesn't only wear a robe. Sometimes it's a file path no one was meant to see. And love it often looks like ordinary people choosing each other one small decision at a time. Now it's your turn. Have you ever stood up when staying quiet was easier? Have you seen a quiet act of kindness change the course of someone's life? Share your story in the comments. Tell us what happened and where you're watching from. Your city, your town, your corner of the world. Let's remind each other that we are not alone. If this moved, you tap, like so it reaches someone who needs hope tonight. Share this video with one person who could use a gentle push to keep going. And if you want more true human stories every day, hit subscribe and turn on the bell. You'll never miss the next chapter. Thank you for spending your time here. Thank you for listening with your heart. Until we meet again, take care of yourself and take care of someone else.